So what we're doing here, I've put a wet coat on my face with the white, and I'm going to pick up a little of my brown gray mix on the corner of my brush, and I'm going to come in and tap it along underneath his headband, along the side of his face, behind the mittens, and down the right side of the eyes. This is creating our shading area. Now we will tap white into it. You'll see what I mean in a second. And I'm going to also tap this shading along the right side of the nose and along the bottom. We'll call this the bottom of the nose. So it basically goes all the way around his face. You want a heavier, more of a shadow, and I'm only putting it on part of the brush when I tap it on there. I've got a fresh load here now, so it's going to be stronger. So I'm going to come along here. My gray brown is a little more brown, but no biggie. Okay, so I'm giving my brush a wipe, and I'm picking up white on the other side of the brush. You know how I talked about one side of the brush? So I will turn the brown part of my brush towards there and the white this way, and I'm just going to gently tap back and forth to soften and kind of walk that bit of a shadow over a bit. So we lose that trimmed line. Just keep reloading with white as you need it. I'll come with my heavier white where it's... So you see how it softens and fades in there. So we're just tapping this in here. This is going to get shaded later on. If you're losing your white, reload again. And I'm not concerned if I'm on a dark background like I am here, I'm not concerned about seeing right through it and still seeing some of the dark shadow in the background. You do see that. If you see my original, you'll still see the dark. Okay. So your object is not to concern yourself with seeing a little of the back. It creates more shading for us and more depth. Okay, so that's what we're going to do right now. That's our goal here. Okay, I'm going to put a wet coat of my cadmium orange hue on the nose. Now I'm going to take Bittersweet. Now Bittersweet's been discontinued, so we mix it with a little bit, actually I put a little bit of red and a little bit of brown and a little bit of black. I'm going to make a recipe for it. So I'm going to come with the Bittersweet. It's one of those things you'll notice it more as it dries. I'm just side-loaded a flat 3/8 or number 10, and I basically apply it. I'll put a little bit more along the bottom and up the right side. I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to pick Tangerine up, which again is discontinued. And you can mix cadmium orange with some bright yellow to create a tangerine. So we now have that color. I'm going to pick up some tangerine with a bit of white. I've mixed it on my quarter-inch lunar blender, and I gave it a scrunch so it spreads open. So I give it a little twist. And I'm going to come along the top of the nose. As you lose your color, you'll just come back and reload. And I'm not pressing hard. I don't want to overwork it in. So you see I've scratched in those light lines. Now I'm going to take, you can use your liner or you can use your my brain freeze here, a liner or a small round, won't matter. And I'm going to take my darkened brown. My note says brown, but I want darkened brown. So that's a little bit of black in brown. And I'm going to bring in some lines. I'll bring a couple from the bottom up. And we want these to look like the carrot's curved, right? So we give it those little bit of a curve. And then I can just loosely outline the carrot. Difference between loosely and outline is I don't go in one continual line. It's just a swipe here, swipe here. They don't necessarily join up, so it doesn't look trimmed. Okay, so that's our goal right now. It is going to be shaded, but I want you to do this so far, and then we're going to add another highlight. All right. I've got my bright tangerine that I've lightened. I'm actually going to add a little more white to that, to the brighter tangerine. So it's a little brighter. I'm going to take my zero round and I'm going to streak a highlight. And we wanted our brown lines to be dry before we did that. So I'm going to streak this highlight. It actually can be even a little more of the white in it. I was being cowardly. Yeah. Okay. Wet coat my eyes with the black. Give my brush a wipe. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of the gray on the corner. And I'm just going to highlight and blend that into the wet paint along the top. So it's kind of as if it's a float, but it just blends into the wet paint. I'm going to give the brush a wipe. I'm going to pick up a little bit of just white on the corner of my brush. So we're going to add the little highlight, and it's just going to be like just, you see how I'll just bend the corner in? That's it. If you make it too bright, you can blot with your finger, but it's not too bad. Then I'm going to take either my zero round or liner, whichever I happen to grab first, and there's a couple of dash highlights along there. I am going to make sure I find my zero round. I keep sticking my arm in front of this on you. And I'm going to take brown and add a highlight or a tint of color along the bottom of the eyes. I leave a little black at the very bottom. I'm not going right down. If you muff up and you go right to the bottom, you just come back with black and outline it again. So I do the brown, and then I'm going to pick up a little bit of the golden brown, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to come back in through the brown, but I'm not going all the way to the top, so it's kind of in the middle of it, and this creates a highlight and just gives a little bit more depth. I can lighten that a bit, even with a bit of white on the brush, and add a bit more of a highlight even. So there's our eyes. We will be putting eyelashes on with black, but
four steps.
So I'm wet coating my hat with my hat mix that I've done. Now if you're changing your colors, of course you need to have 3 values. We need a light, a dark, and a base coat, a medium. So our mix is listed. So I've base coated that, and now I've got my dark mix. I'm going to side load my brush, and I'm going to create a shadow around the outside edge. So it's just, it blends right in nicely for us. So we put that dark all the way, just side load that brush, dirty brush and all, because the light color on my brush on the other side blends it. It's just nice and soft. And then I'm going to come along the bottom, pick up more paint, come along the bottom of the brim, and just let this nicely walk back and forth, blending it in up there a bit. Now I'm going to side load. So I let this kind of set a little bit. That's why I went down to the bottom part. Now I'm going to come along above my brim. We take a lot of, you don't notice this as much once we do our little trim lines. So now we want it to look like it has, and I'll flip my brush over. So I'm just going to create these, I'll go like that.
Is that the darkest mix, Wendy?
Yes. So we just back and forth like so. Depends how wide you want these little rims, rows of knitting. That's what I'm trying to spit out here. So I'll come along like so. Got another row there. So it's like a back-to-back type of thing. So again, the dark would be here. Flip my brush over. Back and forth. I think I'm making my rows a bit wider. Gonna have less knitting to do.
Chunky wool.
Yes, it's chunky wool on this hat. And then we're gonna mimic above. Remember that the hat's rounded up there. So I'm going to be coming, do you see what I'm talking about? A little bit of an angle. So we want to curve those coming down. It's not until we put the stitching in that you get the look of the, knitted. Yeah, our X's. So I'm going to clean my brush. And I'm going to mix a little bit of white into my base coat color. Whoops, and my base coat color was a mix, remember? So it depends what you're base coating with. So I want to make a lighter highlight color. So I'm mixing that up. That looks not too bad. Kind of looks like a blush pink, or yeah, blush pink. Whoops. Now I'm going to just pick up a little bit, and I'm going to kind of come in the middle and just pat in a bit of a highlight. And I'm just applying it here right now, and then I'll just work it in. So we just want to pat that in, just to fade in. You'll see it'll fade right into this wet paint. And this is our highlights in the middle of our rows. And this will help to kind of make it look a little bit more rounded. Or that our rows are raised out. So I'll wipe my brush, and then I'll just pat that in a bit more. Even with my built-in blender. So those blend in, and now I take this lightened color, and I can use a 1/4 inch, might be better, but of course I've still got, you guys can switch to your 1/4 or 3/8. So we're making X's. So you can go through and do those ones if you want first. And then come back and do the across, whichever you like. So that's all my knitting. I want these to come a little bit further. So we're going to go through and we're going to do all of our knitting. I'm not intending on, it's kind of happening, but I'm not intending on not having knitting stitches come into the dark. You do want a little to come over there, so I'm going to move that over there. That really blended that dark. I think I might come back on this one and put a little highlight down the middle of that dark. But we're going to do our stitches, but do them separate. The ones up top you're doing separate, even though, you know, we don't want them to be... See how the upper part doesn't necessarily have, I don't want them to join each other is what I'm trying to say. So we'll do that. I'll get all of the knitting done on here, and then I'll put a little bit of snow in between. Doesn't cover the whole brim, but it goes on a little bit of the brim. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up all this knitting. And like I say, you might feel better to just do the one direction first as you go, and then come back with your second direction. All right, that's our knitting. So we're going to be shading on our hat. So I'm going to do a regular, on our face, pardon me, I'm going to do a regular side load float.
With what color?
Of our darkened brown. And I'm going to nice and softly just shade all the way around beside my eyes. Now these are basically the same places that we stippled our gray brown. So I'll come along underneath the nose and up there. Underneath the hat, I'm just going to reload. I'm not wanting this to be dark, so I am not pressing hard. It's nice and soft. It just kind of dirties him up.
And you wet the brush first.
Yeah, just like our regular side load. So we wet, hold to our paper towel, blot, nice and soft. Now, I will also shade on my carrot. That just strengthens that up nicely. I'm going to soften the edge of my shade there. And if you want to strengthen up your mittens, you could shade on your mittens. They don't really need very much. Maybe a little by his finger there, but they don't seem to be too bad. I darken the bottom of his nose a bit more. So his hat I could shade with this, or I can shade his hat with the dark
Shading mix.
Yeah, mix that I had. So that's what I'm going to go with this. I'm going to come along and strengthen up my shading above my brim. And this is, it's not blending into the wet paint any longer, right? So it is going to be stronger looking, which is what we're looking for. A little along the edge, a little along that outer edge. And if I want, I can come just a smidge down the middle of these pieces.
Did you do it up there?
Yeah, I am going to, yeah. And just, yeah, nice and soft along the top. We're not looking for a lot. So just to strengthen up these little creases that we made, our knitted rows. And then we have the white that we want to add on top. And I would take, you can use your flat brush, you can use a lunar blender. I'm going to just grab a lunar blender, pick up that white paint, and just kind of come in here. You can use a Deerfoot, you could use anything, it doesn't really matter. The whole thing is you want it to be uneven, a little on the hat, a little on the brim. Just give it that little bit of fuzzy fallen snow. Now I'm not going to do the entire, see how I stop and I've tapered it down a little bit so it doesn't go as wide. Just a little out off the edge. There's his brim on there. Now if you could go and you can put more, you could put some on his mitten if you wanted, or you might say, well, I wouldn't mind topping up a little bit of my snow clusters, or, you know, having a little more snow here and there. That's all good. You can add what you'd like. This guy is going to get the pom-pom sewed on. So if I was, so I just slid a pom-pom on there. So if I was wanting to just paint a pom-pom, I could do that with the matching colors to the hat, of course. I would use those and just use my chisel and drag up some little pom-pom marks. As this dries, it's dying down, so I'm going to come back after when it's dry and add a bit more of my highlights on the top of the mitt because they died down quite a bit. All right, so basically that's the finishing on his face and hat. I'm going to add, and this is optional, I'm taking my 1/8 grainer or rake, and I'm just going to come and flick with white, and nothing's happening. I know I'm on a very wrecked brush. I'm just going to come through and add these extra little wisps. Now you don't have to put them in if you don't want. They're just adding a little bit extra highlight. Just fine little wispy hair. And I scrunch my brush on the palette. You're going to just pull a few this way, that way. You're going different directions with them. And I'm going to smudge with my finger if I get any that are a little wider than I want. We're just wanting to use the tip of your rake or comb, or a grainer is what Princeton calls theirs. We call it a 1/8 filbert rake or 1/8 filbert comb. It depends on the company. But we just want to have a nice tiny little wispy fluffs. So that you see this, how this adds a little bit of a highlight. I'm not going in front of my eyes. I'm not going in front of my nose or any of that. I'm not even taking out my cheeks or anything. We're just adding a little bit of these flicks. I don't mind having a couple wisp up into my hat, just to give them a little bit more frosty up here. You can see how I talk about smudging with my finger, or as we call it, our little built-in blender sometimes. But just back and forth, just add a few little wisps, and this is going to give a little bit more highlight to our snowman. Alrighty. Okay, so we're going to take, and I've wet coated, and I'm putting some brown along the edge next to the thumb, and I'm going to go along the outer edge of the mitten. Now my wet coat has already started to dry. I was kind of there, so I picked up a little of the brown. I'm also going to add some dark next to the cuff. So we're on both sides of the cuff. So it's going to give the look that the cuff bends down. I'm going to take and I'm going to put a little bit more of the, there, brown on the finger because I kind of blended it out. So we want this to look like leather, these suede mittens. So we're just going to work this brown from the outer edge inwards, and I just want it loose. We're not looking to have it look like solid, right? So I'm just patting my way inwards. I'm going to give my brush a wipe. I'm going to pick up some of the golden brown, and I'm going to pat that in the middle. And when I say pat, you see how I'm applying it. And I'll put a little on the finger. This is our highlight. So we put a little on the finger and a little on the cuff. And I'm just going to pat my way around so that this blends in to the mitten. But do you see how it has that rough look? So it gives you the look that they're the old suede mitts. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white and just, you can do it with your lunar blender, you can do it with whichever, and just do a few scratchy, almost hashtag looking highlights. It's all going to die down. And in the picture, it always looks like, if you look at the picture, it looks so much brighter than it really is. It's not that bright. So this is going to die down. You may go back after and even add a bit more of the golden brown. It depends. It depends how quickly or how much it dies down. So that's how we're doing our mittens.